We got it wrong. And here's the truth about Gus Lamont. 4 years old, blonde hair, bright eyes, the kind of face that lights up a room and melts the toughest hearts. Today, that same face haunts an entire country. The disappearance of Gus Lamont has become one of Australia's most disturbing mysteries, not just because he vanished, but because nobody can explain how. It was Saturday, September 27th, 2025, a warm, windy afternoon on a sheep station about 40 kilometers south of Yunta, in the harsh deserts of South Australia. Gus was playing outside his grandparents' home, a familiar place, a place he'd been countless times before. His grandmother called him in for dinner around 5 p.m., but this time he didn't answer. Minutes later, she walked outside, and Gus was gone. No sound, no footprints, no trace, just an empty paddock, a dirt mound, and silence stretching across miles of desert. Within hours, his family raised the alarm. Police, volunteers, and the Australian Defence Force began one of the largest ground searches in South Australian history. Helicopters flew overhead, drones swept the land, Aboriginal trackers scoured every possible trail. And yet, as the hours turned into days, the same chilling truth kept echoing through the outback. There was no sign of Gus. No boot prints, no clothing, not a single clue to tell investigators where a 4-year-old boy had gone. Authorities called it a mystery, but to many who have followed the case, it feels like something more, a question that goes beyond logic. Because children don't just vanish in open land without leaving evidence behind. Was this an accident, a disappearance, or something darker that the public hasn't been told? Experts began asking uncomfortable questions. Criminologist Zante Mallet pointed out how unlikely it was for a 4-year-old to wander off undetected in such harsh terrain. Former detective Gary Jubelin added that there's often more information than the public hears, that investigations like this are layered, cautious, and sometimes incomplete. That statement hit a nerve because while official reports insist there's no sign of foul play, many Australians are starting to wonder, how long before we admit that something doesn't add up? Let's start with the last confirmed moment, when Gus was last seen alive. His grandmother told police she saw him playing near a mound of dirt. His mother and grandfather were working roughly 10 kilometers away, tending sheep. No other witnesses were present. The next human being to lay eyes on Gus should have been his grandmother when she called him in, but he was gone. The question few dare to ask is this: when was Gus Lamont last seen in public, outside the family property? Because that detail changes everything. If nobody saw him in the days before September 27th, then the timeline might not begin when we think it does. What if the disappearance didn't happen that afternoon? What if it happened earlier, and the Outback search was looking in the wrong place at the wrong time? Could that explain why there were no footprints, no clothing, not a single clue to tell investigators where a 4-year-old boy had gone? This theory, that Gus may have been gone for days before he was reported missing, isn't confirmed by police, but it's a question serious investigators can't ignore. It forces us to look deeper, not at the desert, but at the timeline. And here's another haunting question. Why did the search yield nothing, not even a trace, when trained teams covered hundreds of kilometers? Search and rescue specialists say even if a child had wandered away, there would be signs, broken shrubs, shoe marks, or remains found by tracker dogs. But Gus left behind nothing. It's as if the earth itself erased him. For many Australians, that's where the unease begins, because if a 4-year-old can disappear from his own yard without a single clue, what does that say about the systems meant to protect children in remote communities? The case of Gus Lamont isn't just a mystery, it's a reflection of how fragile safety can be, even in the places we trust most. You see, in cities, when a child goes missing, there are cameras, neighbors, witnesses. But in the outback, there's silence, isolation, and time. Time that can be used to search or to hide. And that leads to another question nobody wants to voice out loud. Did someone close to Gus know more than they've said? It's a question investigators tread carefully around. They've made it clear there's no evidence pointing to wrongdoing by the family. But no evidence doesn't mean no possibility. And until proof is found, every possibility, no matter how unsettling, remains on the table. Think about it. If a stranger had taken Gus, there would likely be tire marks, footprints, or sightings on nearby roads. None of that exists. If he had wandered off, there'd be at least some trace, a direction, an item of clothing, anything. There isn't. That leaves only two options. Something happened in complete silence, or something happened somewhere else. For the families who live in similar remote regions, this case is terrifying because it proves how easily a story can fracture, how quickly a small detail, a few missing hours, or a quiet afternoon can change everything. And maybe that's why so many Australians are still glued to this story weeks later, because deep down, they sense that this isn't just about Gus, it's about the cracks in the way we search for truth. What if the real answers are buried not under dirt, but under silence? At this point, the official search has been scaled back. Investigators continue to follow leads, review drone footage, and analyze phone data, but the trail has gone cold. And each day that passes without progress makes the questions louder. Could someone have moved Gus's body before police arrived? Could the story have been rehearsed before the report was made? Could the very first version of events, the one we've all heard, be incomplete? Again, there is no proof of that, but it's the kind of question that responsible investigators must ask, because the truth rarely hides in plain sight. It hides in the parts of a story that don't line up. You might be thinking, why focus on such grim possibilities? Because time matters. In cases like this, every day lost can mean evidence destroyed, witnesses forgotten, and memories blurred. And maybe, just maybe, this story could have ended differently if the system had reacted faster, if someone, somewhere had asked the right question on day one. And so we return to that haunting silence, a silence that stretches from Junta to the national headlines, a silence that still hasn't been broken by answers. For those who followed missing child cases before, like Cleo Smith or William Tyrrell, this feels familiar, a familiar ache, a familiar confusion. But Gus's case is different, because this time it's as if the land itself swallowed the truth. The question now is, will it ever be found? If you're watching this right now, remember, stories like this fade fast once the headlines move on, but the truth doesn't fade. It waits. It waits for someone to keep asking the hard questions. And that's why this channel exists, to keep the light on where others turn it off. So before you scroll away, make sure you subscribe, because we're not done. This story isn't over. And as new evidence surfaces, as investigators start to re-examine what really happened on that station, you're going to want to be here when the truth finally breaks. Because somewhere in the red dust of South Australia, there's an answer that's been waiting all along. The real question is, who's brave enough to uncover it? Stay tuned.